So guys, this is one of the most important videos I've ever made. We're about to pitch the two most powerful phones on the entire planet head to head. We've got the Xiaomi Mi 6 on the left and the Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus. And we're going to start with a boot test. Now a lot of these tests are going to be fast forwarded 8 times just to make the viewing experience a little bit better, but you're going to notice that the Xiaomi Mi 6 boots a hell of a lot faster. That is almost a 6-second gap between the two. So what we're going to try now is to open a variety of different applications. This tests the I/O performance, i.e. how responsive the phone is going to be in day-to-day usage. So we've got a variety of games, lots of different apps, all of them fairly demanding, and we're just trying to see how long it takes for them to reach the main menus. So you can see the Xiaomi Mi 6 has been caught up a little bit by Afterpulse, which is one of the more demanding in terms of how long it should take to load, but nonetheless that kind of seemed abnormal. For most applications they seem to be booting up in about the same time, which is to say very fast. But the S8 has managed to do 1.4 laps in the time the Mi 6 did 1. But considering that the rest of the applications apart from Afterpulse seem to open up fine, we're going to put it down to that issue with just the one. So now we're going to move over to Antutu Benchmark, which is going to test the RAM, the CPU and the GPU performance of both phones. Now something interesting you probably noticed is that the Snapdragon 835, whilst clearly a top of the line processor, is slightly different between the two. The one on the Mi 6 is clocked at 2.45 GHz, whereas the one on the S8 is clocked at 2.35. It wasn't really advertised too much, it kind of slipped under the radar a little bit, but this difference could be just enough for the Mi 6 to slip ahead. Also not worth forgetting is that the Mi 6 has an entire 6 GB of RAM compared to 4 GB of the S8. In terms of gaming, it's probably not going to give it too much leverage, but in terms of benchmarking and maybe multitasking, it might start to pull ahead. So the Mi 6 finishes the benchmark first, but also scores a staggering 174,000. The S8 is trailing behind at about 154, and don't forget these are not out-the-box performances. If you took either of these phones out the box and straight away around the benchmark, you would expect even higher results. One of my S8s actually scored about 172 fresh, and the Mi 6, by the same reckoning, could score maybe 180 plus. So in terms of gaming, both smartphones can push any game on the market, at their native resolutions and at the 60 frames per second frame limit of their displays, more or less. But having said that, the native display means something a little bit different for both phones. And bear in mind that the Galaxy S8 is pushing a lot more pixels, it just has more on the screen to do. So in that sense, it's unsurprising that actually it has a few more glitches and a few more hiccups in terms of frame rate. It averaged 55 on Real Racing 3, whereas the Mi 6 had a slightly smoother experience at 58, but to be honest, more or less, both are incredibly smooth, and if you're buying either of these phones, you're not going to need to worry about gaming. So then we're going to go through Geekbench, considered by some a little bit more of a thorough and a little bit more of a reliable benchmark than Antutu. And to be honest, whilst the S8 has a lot going for it on paper, between these two phones everything is pointing towards the Mi 6 being faster. It's got a lot more RAM, it's got a slightly faster CPU, it's got a slightly overclocked GPU, and also less pixels to push. So given that the Mi 6 is so performance oriented, whereas the S8, while still powerful, is a little bit more style and form oriented, it's unsurprising to see the Mi 6 chew through benchmarks a lot faster. What is surprising though is the Mi 6 has a slightly lower score when it comes to single core. Now it's not so much of a difference that it couldn't be due to margin of error, but the multi-core score of the Mi 6 pulls quite a bit ahead, and to be honest, for most cases that is a better representation of the phone's performance, so the Mi 6 gets this one as well. Now a little bit less reliable than traditional benchmarking tests, but nonetheless interesting, is an internet speed test. So I've placed both of these phones quite far away from a not particularly powerful router. And the reason I'm doing that is to test the capabilities of these antennas within the phones at their very limit. And there's no competition, the Mi 6 absolutely destroys the Galaxy S8. So this could either be due to better antennas in the Mi 6, which to be honest I'm pretty skeptical about, or alternatively the arrangement of parts or some sort of material used in the construction of the Galaxy S8 which is interfering somewhat with the signal. And that seems like quite a likely conclusion, because from a variety of different distances, a variety of different networks, the Xiaomi Mi 6 not only loaded pages faster, but also worked better from longer distances away from the router. So guys, that was a pretty interesting speed test. Whilst perhaps it didn't get nearly the publicity that the S8 did, the Mi 6 is surprisingly powerful. In fact, in almost every case seems to be the more powerful option even compared to the Galaxy S8 and S8 Plus. It's a beautiful phone, but does also come with sacrifices of its own, so it's not exactly a case where this is the phone to buy full stop. Anyway guys, if you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you smash that subscribe button, and do check out my other content. I've got a couple of other videos which I think are interesting, and I'll link you in the description below. With that being said, I'm Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'm signing out.